I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. Go through your values, define your values, challenge your values. This is the culture we want to be. What can we do? My philosophy of leadership is literally about lack of self, building a team, and putting them first.
Here we are in the busy, Get Busy studios in LA. I'm sitting here with Aaron Hageman of Hageman Industries Enterprises,
It's
right?
Hageman Enterprises.
Hageman Enterprises. Yeah, and you do a lot of, you're across the Orange Curtain in Southern California here. And, you know, there's so many things that you do, but I want to start at the very beginning, right? Because you are not only a leadership and coaching expert, but you're also a successful serial entrepreneur. So let's talk about your companies and your exits, because they're amazing. So walk us through that. Like, this is your street credit, but you get to be a leadership coach because you've been in it, right?
Yeah, I've always been an entrepreneur first. Right? The coach, that's my personality. The advisor, I love to do those things these days. But, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I was the kid when I was younger that really knew what I wanted to do. Was going to go to law school and studying political science and all these things. And the best thing I ever did was intern with the DA and realize I was not a lawyer, but I was an entrepreneur. And so quickly went into, businesses for myself. So my longest running company that I held was an HR platform. It turned into a tech platform, but I started it in the 90s when it was an HR services business for 1099 independent contractors. Right. And that business is the one that over the years I built, owned it for 20, from 96 to 22. So what is that? 25,
That's
26
a math
years?
Question,
yeah, I don't
Aaron.
need to do math. It's too early in the morning.
That's math.
Well, for 20 plus years, owned this business and ended up selling this company to Walmart and evolved it, turned it into a tech platform for the
How
HR
did you,
workers.
HR is such a niche, right? Like, what was the aha moment? Like, were you like, oh my shit, this is missing. This is the missing piece.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I never grew up and, wasn't that kid that said, when I grow up, I want to own a human resources
says
business.
HR is
I want to be
calling.
a firefighter. When I was a kid, that was it, like all of us. No, for me, so I did catering in college.
Okay.
That was it. I was an independent caterer. And was an independent contractor, getting my early hustle on, working for myself and figuring things out. And there was a company that actually did our paperwork. And I ended up acquiring and buying this business and reorganizing it all. And the aha moment was when I was out, and again, this is in the 90s, and I was in a conference room in Vegas with some industry people around a bunch of delivery companies in the room, and just realized, wow, there's something here that this whole industry needs. They haven't figured out yet.
Right.
And that's how to, really run not only a proper business model, but really do it with the workers in mind, and how to build something, that's, for your people first.
Yeah, I think that, what's really important about that story, first of all, is recognizing opportunity, right? And sometimes it's not some giant, shiny technology in Silicon Valley. Sometimes it's something that you just encounter, right? And you have to be a little bit fearless in pursuing your vision, right? Like, it sounds like this just presented itself and you saw something that other people didn't see. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I love your point that it's not necessarily about the technology or the products. I think that the common ingredient behind successful businesses is the reason why.
Yeah.
Right. We focus on our why and what this business was about, because my why never changed. How we did everything completely changed. We used fax machines and pagers in the 90s when we first started this business to, onboard, drive it.
You remember pagers? Whenever anyone had a pager, they were either a doctor or a drug dealer, right?
Or an HR recruiter, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, so yeah, but the reason why it was always about building a program for, at the time I didn't even realize it, but what we would call today solopreneurs. I've
Yeah.
always been about the entrepreneur and supporting independent contractors, even caterers like myself at the time that grew into other things, was about the reason why never changed. And it was about building something that was the right way to do it, but also really for the workers, because I always knew, I guess my philosophy from the beginning has always been that if we can build programs and companies that are for our people, that, the products, the growth, the customer satisfaction, a lot of those things come in line. So I'm very much on the Richard Branson side of the table of, your people are first.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so that your whole point about the why, right? I like that. I don't hear that very often. And how do you know when you get to your why? Right? Like, is it after you have a pitch deck and you have a business pro forma, or is it an overarching mission for you? The why part of doing or starting an entity.
I think it's a conversation we always have to have, because like a lot of things, it can evolve, and but at the end of the day, yeah, the reason why we run our companies is going to be the differentiator
Yeah.
between us, right? We can all think about that. There's this candle company over here, and there's this candle company over here, but this one is, for eco-friendly, and it's doing it for these reasons. Or why do we
Right.
talk about Tom's shoes?
Right.
Right? That company over all
Patagonia.
the years, Patagonia. I mean,
Yep.
there's so many, when you put a cause behind it, or when you can put your reasoning front and center, it makes a difference. My business was an HR company, and we told all of our clients, like, we're here to build this for the workers. You will benefit. You might not always like what we're here to say, because
Right.
it's for them first.
Yeah.
So it really, really, it becomes a differentiator.
What about, like when I'm talking with startup founders or mentoring, entrepreneurs, one of the challenges, I think, when starting a business or acquiring one, or finding your why, is clarity, right? Your ability to state what you're doing succinctly. And I always tell my entrepreneurs, they're not mine, they don't belong to me, but the people that I'm working with, you need to be able to state what you do in 3 sentences or less, or go back to the drawing board, because you're confusing me. And if you're confusing me, you're going to confuse your investors, you're going to confuse your audience, you're going to confuse your customers. So talk to me about the idea of clarity.
Yeah, I love this question, because I think there's an exercise here. For me, it's often working through the 3 levels of why, what, and how.
Right.
And when we can put it on, even on a whiteboard, and really simplify this statement down into why, what, and how, to be able to turn it into your elevator pitch,
Right.
if you will, that you're talking about.
Exactly.
You have 60 seconds of attention at most these days to explain what you're up to. If you can understand the delineation between the 3, when it comes down to saying, here's who we are, here's what we do, and here's why it is, you can actually get all these points in. But it takes a lot of coaching on this. I say an exercise, because I know for me with my businesses, it's hard for any of us to see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
So bringing in outside coaches to even run these facilitated exercises for me and my leadership teams were immensely valuable. And it's what I do now for other companies,
Yeah.
where an outside coach can come in and help keep pushing and say, I don't understand. It's not simple enough. It's
Yeah,
not simple enough.
exactly.
The investor is going to kick you out of the room.
Exactly.
Those types of things.
Yeah, and there's the whole tech movement and all these ecosystems popping up all over the world.
Mhm.
Tech is like very easily taken down a rabbit hole of confusion, right? So when I get startups coming to me, or founders, and they give me a spreadsheet of what they do, I'm like, you can't, especially non-US founders, right? Like entrepreneurship is very much a part of our culture here in this country.
Sure.
In other countries, it's a very, very new concept, right? So new that it's, culturally challenging, right? We're used to speaking about clarity, mission statement, and all of that. And so, I think that out of the gate, I always give the example, and I'm curious what your example might be. But, like when I interviewed Jake Burton, right, long time ago,
Mhm.
Burton Snowboards, their message is very clear. we make snowboards that are better than everybody else's because we use this material, they're US made, like it's very, very clear. And so I use that example for other startups who are not making snowboards, who are maybe working with AI or maybe working with chip technology or whatever it is. What is your go-to case study of, an example of clarity and of executing that why?
Yeah, man. We talking about technology and the tech startups because every time you say that, I immediately get into the sort of the lower levels. We go
Right.
from why, because technology to me is just what and maybe even how.
Yeah.
And as soon as we're talking about that, I think we're off mission,
Right.
right? So when we can talk about our values and bring the corporate values into the conversation on the top, one of my favorite TED Talks that we've all probably seen that talks about this example is from Simon Sinek back in the
Yeah.
day,
Yep.
where he's talking about this, and he gives a couple of examples, and the one just right now that's coming to mind is Apple. Right. And Apple and all of their marketing and all of what they're trying to do is they're drawing in people that their mantra for years was think differently.
Right.
Right. And that was what they focused on. Okay, what they did would change. They made this product. 5 years later, they made computers and they made phones and they made iPod shuffles or whatever we had over the
Right.
years. But
Right.
the ideation behind it was always drawing in their customer base to that side. So when you can put the mission of what the idea is behind it up front, to me, those become the powerful things that draw together because the why is more than selling, clients and getting investors,
Yeah.
like we said on here. To me, my mantra is over the years has become building businesses through people. So part of the repetitive dynamic of leadership is often talking to your why to your team,
Right.
to the internal side of these things. So if you're like, this is what we're about.
Exactly.
My business, the one I end up selling, our number one mantra, and it became kind of repetitive. The people got sick of me talking about was people first,
Right.
our team first. Two, didn't matter about the customers. It didn't matter about our tech. It didn't matter, everything we did, the decisions would be run through that lens. And that became an undercurrent behind what we did and a great example of, well, people understood when they came to work there, what the philosophy were when we were recruiting because we were growing so much, things like that. So
I want to go back to something you just said, and you glossed over it as if it was nothing. But I think it's really important for startups to have this conversation about values.
Yeah.
And when we talk about values in a startup, environment, a lot of times investors are, in your deck, you have to say, these are our core values. All of this. As soon as you get the funding, the core values page goes into the dustbin of history. Blah blah blah. But when you look throughout the history of very successful companies like Apple, like Burton, like Patagonia, they have a set of core values that they do not veer from, right? And it is they live and breathe these values. And so when you are working with leaders, and it's a leadership thing, right? This is a top down, if you want people to be a part of your why and to be a part of this community you're creating, you have to know what you stand for, right? Talk to us a little bit about identifying. And, it doesn't have to be some faith-based thing. Values are, it's like, I believe in the planet. It can be, a cause. It can be of a philosophy. It can be about the people. So how do you, as a leader or as a founder of how do you do that?
That is a great question. Honestly, I remember when I was younger in the early stages of my entrepreneurial journey, I thought this was a bunch of crap.
Yeah, I know a lot of people
Right?
do. It's like
Like
this
you
is
walk through, you
soft.
go on a tour, you go to Zappos,
Right.
and you go through Tony's offices,
Right.
and there's,
all on
the
the
values
walls.
are painted
Yeah.
on the wall,
Yeah.
and there's these things, and it's interesting. I thought it was really hokey, and when I teach and coach this these days, my spiel is taking the values off of the wall.
Yeah.
Taking them off of the wall into play. Like, how do
Yeah.
we get these ideas
I love
off
that.
the wall and into life? And so there's tactical ways to implement them, but let me go back a step. This is a conversation, again, that should happen from day one because it starts with the leadership team.
Yep.
Is to go through your values, define your values, challenge your values. For me, when you're in business for 10, 15, 20 years, because the leadership team is so important that, the ideation of these leaders, their values become what starts to trickle down.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to do it. How will I do this in the context? Explain this in the context of a podcast. To me, they have to become a lens. The first thing that I would tell everybody listening to do is to take their 3, 4 stated values off the walls, whatever they are. I'll give you 2 examples for me that we would use: people first, and a lifelong learning. Like, I'm a learner, that's why I do these podcasts, listen to podcasts. Like, it's just part of who we are and how it is. So the goal here is to use them as a filtration lens for and I'll push you, every decision you're making.
Right.
So an example, when we had a hiring process that had a scoring system, right? We had 20 categories. This person's experience, we get to the top 3 candidates, rank them, how, location, experience, tenure, blah, blah, blah. But we put our values on there, and we learn to recruit against our values to explain, here's the values of this organization. Tell me things you're doing as a learner. Are you a learner?
Right.
Are you going to fit in here? Right. And so, if you're hiring, if you're firing, when we would do reviews, there's ways, there's very tactical ways. There's no big idea here. There's no home run I would give everybody, but lots of singles and doubles to lay into your organization that, would bring the values back to life and not leave them on the wall. One last example I'm pretty famous for is I'm so people oriented and just kind of cheesy sometimes that when I started meetings, we would start with something we call positive recognitions for any cadence meeting. If it was a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, positive recognitions within the team and the structures. After a while, we said, now choose a value and then choose a positive recognition. So suddenly in everybody's weekly meeting, everybody through the organization is saying, oh, I recognize Joe for, integrity because he did this, or for lifelong learning because he took the new trainee under his wing and was really dedicated to help them, whatever. And so it became conversational, and there's just ways to get them off the wall and to live them. It's so imperative.
Yeah. And along those lines, when we're talking about, core values of a company, of a brand, of the storytelling, talk a little bit about how those values influence the culture.
Yeah. Culture is an amorphous thing. Everybody wants to define culture and talk about culture. And I actually would argue culture is the byproduct of everything we do.
Yeah.
Right. So it's we don't we inadvertently create the culture, right? And so this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you have an organization that is dedicated towards certain things, it's going to show up in the business, right? So culture is what we do repeatedly, I would argue, good or bad.
Right.
Right? If you're always reprimanding people, you're a culture of, man, this is a place that my boss is always on my ass. Or if it's overmanaged, I've got 8 TPS reports to turn in, these types of things. Or is the culture one of affirmation and support? And, where the bosses are trained to say, what are your roadblocks? How can I help you today? Which, by the way, was our closing thing for all leadership in our meetings, was to finish with roadblocks. And that's leadership's job in our cultures. So I'm just babbling here, but it's about taking the values, putting the values into play. And now we're talking about what is our culture?
Yeah. Yeah. And we had spoken a little bit about that, creating cultures of excellence, that whole platform. And, you talked a little bit, this was a while ago, about how to measure, why does culture matter? And then we're going to get into the people part, right? Mm-hmm. Because the people and the culture are always going to impact the success of a company. I mean, it is a mathematical, proven scientific fact.
The ingredients to our soup.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so, what is a culture of excellence? What does that look like, right? Clearly, it's not like the Wolf of Wall Street, it's not that. But
that's a culture.
It is a
they
culture.
Had a culture.
That
employees would describe their culture.
Exactly. It was known. It had its own footprint. Google has a culture, right?
Riding bikes around campus.
Right. It's kind of strange.
The things we hear on the outside in. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Their culture is a fun place to work. It's family friendly. Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and sometimes when you walk into a company or a building, you can feel what the culture is as a consumer and as a participant in that culture. So let's talk about how culture is an extension of a brand and how you know if you have a great culture or not.
Well, to the last part of that, you got to ask. right?
Who are you asking?
To me, it's about our teams. It's about our employees. So I'm going, not only them, but I'm going to start there, right? Our customers
Yeah.
have a perception of our culture. The outside market has a perception of our culture, right? But I'm going to start, it's just my philosophy, it's the way my brain's wired. I'm going to start internal. And I'm going to weigh 80% of my response on the culture of my team because they're going to know it.
Right.
They're going to, my assistant's going to know our culture better than, our customers, right? Just by
Right.
rule. So to me, there is a process of surveying and measuring. Right. And this has always been a hard one. People are like, well, how do you measure culture? How do you measure employee satisfaction? We just created a baseline and did it. Is
Right.
the answer here.
Right.
Right. So
you can find a way.
yeah. And I'm happy to share the way if we ever want to follow up. But we would create questions. We would create a scoring rubric of 1 to 10
Yeah.
on here and just create a surveying consistency and then a cadence. And so we're always taking the pulse and we're always asking, what can we do better? What's missing?
Right.
What's good? What's bad? What do you hate about working here? What do you like about
Yeah.
working here? Right? Do you have a culture of emotional safety where people
Yeah.
can say these things? You
Yeah.
know, so that you gotta to be able to do that, and for us to ask and create a cadence on here. I mean, we just gave this metric and a bonus to our HR director. Then after a while, we're like, hey, make this a great place to work. Your job is to put us on
Yeah.
Los Angeles or Orange County's best place to work.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And if the average score was 7.2 last quarter from the employees on this rubric, like, let's go get a 7.5 this time.
Right.
And so it was, and honestly, the process told our people that we actually cared.
Yeah. You care.
Like we're doing something, we're listening, we're taking action, we're following up, and that. So ask and measure over.
I'm going to give you a scenario, and
Ask, measure,
this is
repeat.
real. And since you're,
All right, let's go.
we're
Free.
doing sort of the psychological
I like it.
breakdown of culture. So I worked in a media company a while ago, and the CEO who also owned the company came out and told everybody, all of the staff, the salespeople, the creatives, the writer, whatever, and he said, "We are now," okay, it was an announcement, right? We are now a culture of creativity, right? And so it was this broad sweeping statement that we now are, and I am telling you, I have never seen such a lack of creativity come, like everybody shut down, right? And we were unable to create because we were told that we are now like, what does that even mean? So tell me what went wrong there.
It's a matter of action plans, right? And involvement. I think one culture, it's hard, especially in a moving, engine, as it were,
Yeah.
to stand in front of a room and dictate to the room, okay, this is not how
Right.
things are.
Right.
Change has to come when you have a team that, of any size, they have to be involved. They have to come from within. So I think part of this is the idea of involvement more, first
Right.
of all.
Right.
Right. Say, hey, this is the culture we want to be.
How do we get
What can
there?
we do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? What are our ideas? But to me, it's, again, I'll stick with it, taking this value of creativity in your example off the wall and turning it into action.
Right.
So what are we going to do to be more creative? Like, had that CEO launched it with, here's just 3 initial action ideas. We're going to have creative Thursdays and,
Right.
Lego Mondays, or I don't know what I'm saying,
Right.
but,
Right. Something.
or conscious creative time, right?
Or I think the idea was he wanted organic growth, right? Which is different than creating a culture of creativity, right? So yeah, I think as a leader, choosing your words and understanding the why, back to the big W that you whipped out earlier, I think it's really, really super crucial, but it kind of is a nice transition into the topic of leadership, because in any company of any size, the corporate culture, the brand, everything will take on the essence of its leader. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, more often than not.
Yeah.
More often than not.
Yeah. And so it's, let's talk about leadership and talk about traits of successful leaders. And are leaders made or born? Can you teach it? And then let's talk about managers versus leaders, right? Like, all of these topics are very big and they are very deep, but they are so incredibly important to the success or failure of an organization. So leadership?
Yeah, where to start?
Where to start?
You gave me 6 prompts.
I
I'll
know.
just
I
pick
know.
one
Let's
out of
talk
there. That's
about,
good.
leaders, you know, the traits of excellent leaders. Like you work with people, like what are some of the things, the trends that you see in characteristics of excellent leadership?
So, I know. Okay, so for me, it starts with the idea of looking inward. When we're looking at management versus leadership, team building, what makes a great leader, individual, what am I good at, or otherwise, starting with it's a skill of being self-aware. My team always jokes about it because I say self-awareness is a superpower. I say that all the time. I believe it's one of the most important strengths of a leader. Do I have a large ego? Because I got an ego.
Yeah.
I'm kind of arrogant at times. I think I'm pretty smart. And so my self-awareness goes, oh, okay, when do I leverage that? When do I put that in check? When do, I'm going to step on people. Sometimes I'm a loud voice, maybe I should just leave the room, whatever. It starts with self-awareness. Right. I teach an executive assistant module these days, right? Want to hire a great assistant? Yeah. Don't hire yourself.
Right.
Right? What am I terrible at? Or what do I do that my assistant's going to need to do with me that they need to also be good at as well to elevate me, not just compliment me? Like we really got to think through these things as a leader. So my first opener to this conversation is starting with self, right? Because if you need to build a leadership team around us, which I think is the next segue to maybe the next topic here, I got to know what I'm good at.
Right. How do you do that? Right. Like if your ego and you're, worried about the board or you're worried about, hiring, how do you what does that mean to be introspective? Right. Because it's hard. That is you are asking very hard things of a person.
It is not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you're going to have to be willing to kick your own ass on this one, right? You're going to have to be willing to take the thumps on this. So a couple of things on this, how do you do that? One, you need not just people you trust, but people that trust you. It needs to be a lieutenant on your team that needs to be able to say, hey, you're being an ass today, boss. You're being untenable. Go back in your office. I'll take care of this right now. Or those types of things. Or to say, you're really just not that good at this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you need that. Everybody needs that.
And so there's ways to do that. So what I'm saying is not just the team. You have to, as a leader, we have to create that environment. You have to create that environment of humility, of humbleness, of hey, open feedback is a good thing, right? So for me, I believe in personal development and growth. It's one of my values, one of my mantras at every company I do, whether it's a soccer team I've owned or my HR company. And it's part of that is being very willing to take a beating. To be open on this and things like that. So one, you have to create that environment. Two, you have to get the people around you that are going to be honest.
Yeah. Talk to me about listening, because everything you're saying is,
you throw it out the window if I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because to me, leadership is so much more than just a title. You know what I mean? It is trust. It is that introspection. It is humility, right? And it is listening. And so let's talk. I mean, it sounds like such a soft science, Oprah Winfrey kind of thing, but listening to me is the key to great leadership.
A great one too, because I'm not inherently personally a great listener. I'm not. It's a skill I've had to work on.
Okay. How did you do that?
One thing, I usually have a pad of paper in a meeting with me and pen, and I will use it to not interrupt people, right? And to stay engaged, or to write my question down later, or a thought to come back and stay engaged with that person, and to have people around me. I absolutely believe in coaches. And, one of my ladder coaches, we were focused on high EQ stuff.
Right.
Emotional intelligence, listening, ego, these types of things.
So important.
And so if I have a coach there that's only here, it's I believe I love athletics, and it's you got a pitching coach and a running base coach and a batting coach and this and that. And you bring him in. And if that coach is here to be we're going to work on your leadership ego and these types of things or whatever, it was imperative in that case. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we're going to call this the leadership module, and then we're going to skip into the management versus leadership. Sure. But, if you had to, on the spot, give me 3 traits of excellent leadership, what would those 3 be?
Selflessness. I'm going off the cuff here.
It's good. It's
confidence, and that's what I'm looking for. looking for a version of openness, humility, willing to learn. I don't know. Take a word out of the last little smash
Okay.
there.
Oh, wait, say those again, because you were
Openness, humility, willing to learn. So it's a matter of, that you have to be open. You can't dictate as a leader.
right,
I think this comes down to philosophy. And I think the last thing in this piece that I've been thinking behind it all is leadership is not about us.
right,
For me, my philosophy of leadership is literally about lack of self, building a team, and putting them first. And so this lack of this idea of putting others first in the context of leadership is what it's all about.
right.
Building a team is being grateful for their success, and their success defines your success.
Yeah,
So great leaders aren't really front and center,
right.
right? They're in the back, if
Right.
you will.
I agree with that. And, great leaders inspire greatness, right? Like they want people to be the best versions of themselves,
Exactly.
not just for the greater good of the entity, but for the greater good of the person. Right.
That's exactly right.
I just deeply believe that the great leaders I've been exposed to have always had this way of inspiring me in ways that I didn't know, needed inspiring. And the other thing, before we switch modules here, let's not
Yeah.
call them modules.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't have your notes, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't need, I mean, I'm just riffing here. So there's this whole, and I keep having these conversations, and sometimes they're really fucking funny, but the whole topic of authentic leadership, right? Authentic, all of it. Like it's just sort of its own category. And, it's getting into the bullshit zone when we talk about authentic anything, because what does that mean? Right? Like, what does it mean to be an authentic leader?
For me, it's showing up consistently all the time, no matter the same, right? Like you are who you are. You're showing up the same, whether you're running a meeting, whether you're with your team, out in a bowling team building activity night or something like that, or whether you're at home, not with your teams. Like for me, it's about, I'm back to self-awareness to a strong degree, but if you know who you are and you're confident in who you are and how you work and how you show up, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, with the confusing lexicon swirling the topic of leadership, because everybody has an opinion, I think the things that you pointed out, are really, really important. And, that's trust, listening, and, being open and transparent and really wanting the best for the people around you, right? I think those are just
exactly right.
little gems of information that you have just shared on the blue couch. Now, let's transition into the next topic, which is management versus leadership, especially for entrepreneurs, startups, and founders. Like, what is the difference, right?
So the way I think about it is, I will start off simple. Management is about managing work and results. Leadership is about leading and developing people, right? If I'm a manager and I'm running a team, right? Just in both scenarios, what people get confused is you have teams under you in both scenarios. But if I'm a manager, I need to run this team to effectuate an outcome, right? I'm managing the results. I'm responsible for the results of the work, whatever it is. But if I'm in leadership, my job is to build the team, build the people, and these types of things. So
Right.
my focus is going to be different if I'm in leadership versus management. It's going to be on development. It's going to be on training. It's going to be on, I'm a supportive leader in the way we try to build things. So again, what are your roadblocks? What are you working on? Right? And it's about making the individual better, because if leadership is developing your talent, then the work will get better, right? In terms of results. So they're very, very different, right? The skill sets, like you can develop interview questions around these two things. Because I know when I'm looking for a leader, I'm going to start to ask questions about, well, what are your ideas around these philosophy? Tell me about the difference between the two, because leaders will understand that their job is to build a team.
Right.
right? My job as the CEO of that large company that I ended up selling. I mean, we got to a couple $1 billion run rate in terms of like what we were running through the engine. And, like I didn't deal with the customers. I didn't deal with the tech platform, maybe less a Walmart or somebody, the marquee customers you'd have political interactions with, but I'm
Right.
not doing the
Right.
work. I'm
Right.
not on the sales floor and things like that. So my job was to build a leadership team. I'm literally behind the scenes, like making them better. I mean, my job may as well have been take them into the gym,
Yeah. Yeah.
like get tougher
Yeah.
and stronger and faster. So that's really the difference. To me, it becomes just a really hard line. Like,
Yeah.
is my job the people or is my job the results of the work?
Right. And, if you're a founder of a small startup, raising capital or bootstrapping or whatever it is, and you have to be both,
Yeah.
right? How does that even, because those are opposing dynamics, right? What is your advice? Because I am a terrible manager. I am terrible at its process,
Right,
admin.
right.
I'm a pretty good leader, right?
Yeah,
Because it's a
good.
little more, but if you have to do both, what is your advice to those kinds of entrepreneurs?
It's a hard one, but it's the idea. The answer is to compartmentalize. But if I expand on that, what I mean is, let's go take the analogy of, we all say we wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, think of that very specifically because I run with this analogy in coaching a lot. Great. You're a startup entrepreneur. You have no team. You're a solopreneur. You literally have to wear every hat. So what do? I would coach and teach you to be conscious of what hat am I wearing right now and put it into your calendar that way. Hey, we're going to go follow up on goals and results and this. The manager in me is all about goals because I'm a very people-oriented person. I am naturally a leader too. So if I have to lean into management side on here, for me, it's a lot about goals and this and that. And
Yeah.
we know we're going to get into that. Hey, we're here to talk about this. Right. So it's just, I don't know. We just would want to know and think as the boss, when am I going to be a leader to my team and when am I going to manage my team? So an example, and I would say I'll go to like an assistant or a direct report relationship. Management is going into my weekly meetings. Okay, how'd you do last week? What are we working on this week? How can I help you? That's all still management, right? Leadership is, hey, we have a regularly scheduled one-on-one. We got coffee every Tuesday. How you doing? It's your agenda. What's going on? What's weighing you down? Where's your stress? Right. I mean, I'm obviously not managing right now, and I'm putting on a leadership hat because I have a different agenda. So for me, what I just did is, okay, I've got a weekly operating meeting, and I've got a cadence for a one-on-one, or a touch point or something like that. So what's our role? What are we trying to do? And you got to be good. You got to
Yeah.
be disciplined.
Yeah.
Don't slide into management in your one-on-one, or they won't trust you.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Exactly. So when you're coaching, and you're coaching, let's call it a CEO who happens to lean into being more of a manager.
Sure.
How do you coach someone into being a leader? Like
Yeah.
how does that even work?
It's tactics, right?
Right.
So it's going to be studying leadership. It's going to be reading about leadership, different types of leadership. Like at the book nerd side of me is going to kind of lead into that. Okay, you're having a hard time with leadership. Let's really disseminate management,
Yeah.
who you're good at versus leadership, and what is the difference here? Because you might not understand, right? So we're going to start there, and then we're going to put some tactical things on the board. Right. So I will go back to the example I just gave of like that one-on-one. So I train the one-on-ones like, okay, here's the way to do it. Right. It's not your agenda. You're not allowed to do this. You're only allowed, right. Having these types of things and understanding leadership, putting together a playbook, say, hey, let's start simple. Let's start with leadership 101. Okay, let's do these things. Right. Let's learn to elevate others, or whatever the leadership, ideology is.
Yeah.
So that's really what it is. And you could invert that for management. I'm not good at management.
So with your experience and coaching and getting to hang out with, some really influential leaders around the country, are leaders born or made?
So, yeah, I've thought about this a lot. It's a skill. So I'm going to lean to the side of, I don't know if made's the right word, but training, development, right? One can develop into a great leader, right? You can mentor with leaders and, intern with this,
Yeah.
and study leadership, and you can get good at it. But it does not mean that some don't have inherent skill sets.
Right.
Right. So that's where, you could be born the Kobe Bryant, but then you work really hard and then you still continue to train. So So for me, I think I've become a pretty good leader because I started as a good leader, but I'm a lifelong learner.
Right.
So I've worked with others and done these things and learned how to get in my own way, out of my own way, and less Aaron and more others and whatever,
Yeah.
to really understand that, self-awareness of how to leverage my skills as a leader and such. So I believe, again, long-winded answer, sort of politically correct, both, but it's just don't be disheartened, to the audience out there if you're like, man, I'm just not good at one side of these things, because
Right.
they're absolute skills that can be built.
I mean, I think you can definitely learn management. There's some sort of something magic about an excellent leader, right?
Sure.
It's like some sort of, secret sauce, that it's a DNA thing, I think, for certain characteristics of leader, that ability to influence and inspire. I don't know that you can learn that. Do you? I mean, we might just differ on this.
No, I follow what you're saying. But at the same time, I guess where I'm coming from is that one could be born a great leader with natural leadership skill sets, but you still be really shitty at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You still not execute it
Right.
well. So I also believe the inversion of that, or the other side of that, is that one could be born a decent leader.
Right.
And work to become better.
Yeah.
Now, what are we saying? I guess if you start with zero skills on here, I don't know if you're ever going to become a great leader.
Right. But it's possible, transformations happen, and you're a part of, the transformation of a lot of different leaders. And, so in your experience, and I know you're putting the final touches on your book, and you've got all kinds of things going.
Thanks for plugging it. So.
Yeah. What's it called?
We are calling it From Dropout to Delivery Kingpin.
Okay. So it's your autobiography.
Kingpin, yeah. Yeah, folloss that story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're a kingpin now.
Yeah, you like that?
You look good on that purple couch. Kingpin.
I thought it was blue.
I keep calling it purple, and I think it may be the lights or, casting
We have tech.
purple.
We can make it whatever color we want.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah. What are some of the, without revealing, secrets and, NDAs and all of that, what are some of the surprising things you have found in your, your study of leadership with different personalities? Has anything just been like, wow, that's fucked up?
Man, surprising things in leadership. I don't know. It's a tough question. There's not too much that's caught me off guard, to the way you kind of phrase the question.
That's a bummer, because I was looking for some, some spilling the tea here.
At the end of the day, one of the challenges in leadership is talented people. Mm-hmm. And I work with, I'm sure both work with a lot of talented entrepreneurs. And one of the sins of talent is that crosses over and can contradict with leadership. Because building a great leader and building a great team is acknowledging that you don't have to leverage that talent. You need to build a team. Right. So one of the coaching things I always lean on, for example, and I think this is sort of where at least for me, it's where your question was going. And it's something I have a really hard time with certain entrepreneurs that are very talented and have large egos to get out of the way, which is the idea that they're like, I have to be the salesperson.
Right.
Right. And because they're talented at that, and the sin of leadership on here, and again, it's not some dramatic, oh shit moment, but the sin of leadership is that they're inherently killing the growth of their organizations by continuing to need to be upfront.
Right.
And the fact is, and here's the hard part, is that they're often right.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the customers want to buy from the CEO, from the founder, from the entrepreneur. They may be great. They may be the most, but maybe always be the most passionate person in their organization to sell something. But the coaching ideology here is that as soon as I get 2 sales reps that are 80% as good as you, sit the fuck down. And let's go build a team, because especially at scale, and I was thinking about this morning, if you've got a team of 20 sales reps and you're involved, you're actually doing more harm than good now.
Right.
Even if you're, I'm great, you're out there, you're not doing your job, you're getting in the way of these things, and you could be building a larger organization. So some of the sins of leadership is weirdly talent.
Yeah.
It's people that think they need to, sales is only an example. They need to do this. They need to do that. They can't build the organization to get out of their own way, which at a certain point, if you can't grow, can become a death sort of knell at that point.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important, because that's a trust thing, right? And it's also an ego thing, like getting out of your way and trusting people to front for you. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going to put this term out here, and I
All
want
right.
I want you to tell me what you're
I don't know. Is
like.
it real or are you making up words?
No, I'm not making. I will in a minute. So when you hear the term entrepreneurial leadership, right? What does that mean? And if you are the CEO of a huge, public can you be entrepreneurial in your leadership? What does that mean?
That is a great question, because I know for myself, and having been on all ends of the journey,
Yeah.
where you're the solopreneur, you're feeling very entrepreneurial, and you're coming
Yeah.
up with the ideas, you're doing
Yeah.
this, to where at the end you're the CEO of an organization that is, sort of removed, if you will, from even business development and products, and you're like, what are we even doing over here these days? Right? How does that work? Starts to get away from you. They're two skill sets. They really are. So the entrepreneur versus the CEO
Yeah.
is the balance, right? So, and here's the thing. It's interesting. This is reminding me of our conversation just in front of this about developing leadership, right? Is it natural or not? Because entrepreneurs, I would argue, is a personality type. We've probably heard like
That's
it's
interesting.
a 3% sort of. I'm creative. I'm entrepreneurial. I'm
So
gonna
can entrepreneurs be made, or are they born?
Well, let's see. We're going to keep getting this
Uh-oh.
nature nurture
Uh-oh.
conversation. And where am I going with this? And so, to your question, I think there's a best practices playbook out there. Of here's how to be a great CEO, and we can learn from the last 150 years of, all the great examples. I won't even get into, all the different CEOs and how to build good teams, run good teams. I believe there's a playbook. I think a lot of us at a certain level could go kind of run and help most organizations from a CEO perspective on that. So to your initial question, we've got to recognize where we're at in the journey.
Yeah.
As entrepreneurs, we're always going to be entrepreneurs, but where are we at in that CEO skill set journey?
Yeah.
Right? Because as young entrepreneurs, we could be very talented, very successful. And, so many great stories of entrepreneurs in their early 20s and this and that, but they don't necessarily have the skill set yet that comes from experience or training or otherwise to, running large organizations. Yeah. Wow, I have 3,000 people here. How can I make sure that we're not siloing and that we're building cross-compartmental communications? And there's people that know how to do these things. So I believe as entrepreneurs, if we're the visionary and we're at the front, I love that. I read an idea of the inverted org chart. We're actually at the bottom of an upside down triangle, right? And all the org charts we always see are backwards, and it's just building everything on top of us.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And everything behind us. So that's what the entrepreneur is. Like, can I add the skills I need to really be able to balance a huge organization? And it's how far we as entrepreneurs take the development of our skills that let us see how far we can go in the organizations we build.
Yeah.
It's a capacity thing. I would argue, how many businesses do we know that were great ideas that got stuck at $5 million?
Right. So many, most.
It's usually going to be a capacity.
Yeah.
It's an old coach talked to me about leadership capacity. What's your leadership capacity? Well, I can.
What does that mean, leadership capacity?
I don't know. I can run an organization this size, or I can run an organization this size. Leading leaders becomes a different skill set after a while. I mean, at the end of my entrepreneurial run with the last business I sold, you're recruiting in executives from around the country. These are leaders that have built and sold other businesses. Well, you're not going to tell them what to do. You're going to lead them as a peer on your team. And anyway, so just different skill sets as we get along.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so grateful for your time because first of all, your passion comes through and every time you open your mouth.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse, for clean words, dirty words, the whole deal. On leadership and coaching and mentoring, what is your advice to young startups today? Like, again, 3 chunks.
Yeah.
What do you say? How do you advise them on leadership?
Okay, 3 chunks. Let's go.
Or 3 to 5.
Yeah, nothing's ever easy with me. No. But one, get a coach and be specific of what you need your coaches for. So the first thing is, as entrepreneurs, we all need coaches. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a 30-year entrepreneur or a 3-year entrepreneur. We all need coaches in our journey, right? And be specific of what a coach is for. I'm going to lean on that term coach, right? Is this a coach for scaling a business? Is this a coach for, raising money? Is this a coach for this? Again, go to the sports analogy. Do I need a batting coach? Do I need a base running coach?
Right.
Do I need this? Do I need to learn how to catch or hit? Like, what do I got to work on? So always, always, always have at least one or multiple coaches in your life. 2, have a mentor. A mentor is somebody who is not going to coach you necessarily, but they're going to advise you. They're going to lead you. I would
Hold you
argue
accountable.
They're going to hold you accountable. I find great mentors often have comparable personality types to us, right? They know what we've been through. They know how we might react to those things. And their mentors are always going to be 10 to 20 years down the line. The third thing on here, I love this one recently because I'm in my, mid 40s, ish these days, of the idea of always, and here's the third one, always mentor somebody else.
Yeah.
Always be mentoring.
Yep.
Right? The teacher in me knows that I gain so much as teaching as being taught. Right? Reiterating lessons, hearing new things, seeing somebody else of 20 years younger than me take something that's a totally different thing. And of course, mentoring others is going to teach you and keep you fresh and learn these types of things. So I am a believer in the dedication to lifelong learning and this ideology. So as an entrepreneur, coaches, mentors, and mentees.
And I would add one to that just based on this conversation. Can I add one to your list here? This is just based on things that you have said, but I think that whole lifelong learner conversation, stay curious, right? Like read. Yeah. Not just Malcolm Gladwell books, read books, write things in a notebook, like engage with
Take
knowledge. Take a class. It doesn't have to be a business class. Just
100%.
Like stay sharp.
Take a language. Learn guitar. Learn piano. Learn to surf.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What is an entrepreneur?
Man, an entrepreneur is an artist. An entrepreneur is somebody who can take an idea, to take a fuzzy, abstract concept and turn it into something. I think entrepreneurs often create engines that, build and support economic outputs for other people. So to me, an entrepreneur is an artist.
What is the best piece of non-business advice you have ever gotten?
Put your gas mask on first. Put your mask on first when it comes down from the ceiling. Really, I think for me, the idea of leadership and not just entrepreneurial leadership, but being a father and being a leader of friends and your community and whatever that means you need to be strong. And I don't mean physically strong, although maybe I do. Right? If there's a fire and you need to carry your big fat dog out of the house, there you go, right? Got to be strong. Anyway, so whatever that is, emotionally strong, fortitude, we've got to be Atlas to carry the world on our shoulders at times.
What is the biggest mistake you've ever made?
For me, it's usually trying to do too much. Most of my mistakes come when I try to solve it myself and I'm not leveraging the talents or the team around me, or even if it's something simple and I'm like, I could do it. Like, why wouldn't you do it with two people? Like, I could pick up that 100-pound thing. Well, two of us can do it like a lot easier. It's, so for me, most of my mistakes, and whether they were dramatic mistakes or they were just mistakes that kind of slowed me down, were just trying to do too much, as the kids say. Aaron, you're doing too much.
All right. So we're doing this sort of unscientific survey between Colorado and California.
Okay.
So the question is, how do you express yourself in a curse word? Are you a fuck or a shit or a damn?
Well, I'm a fuck.
Most California is, weirdly.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take your geographical tie to it. So I thought it might be a personality thing, but hey, I guess if I was just born on the West Coast, then that's how it is.
We have 5 fucks in California and 6 shits in Colorado. So it's sort of like this little battle of how we express ourselves in curse words.
I can't wait to see where New York weighs in on this.
Yeah, New York is in a couple weeks, so we'll, that's going to be
next?
Yeah,
that's fun. That's
exciting. All right. Well, I cannot thank you enough for making the humongous
This has been great.
drive across the orange curtain and sitting down on the bluish purple couch with us this morning. It's just been a joy.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.